All right, how's it going, everybody? Welcome back to Engineering Major Philosophy Minor. The acronym for that is EMPM, and this is the channel where you can get a working aerospace engineer's opinions on topics pertaining to engineering, philosophy, politics, and various other social and cultural issues. Maybe that's technically 5. And I just got done having some pretty heated debates with some people. And so at this point, I want to do something to lighten my mood a little bit because these were some pretty challenging discussions. And as you, well, maybe you know, maybe you don't. I'm very into bodybuilding. I did originally, when I started doing YouTube, I started a fitness channel. I've mentioned this before. Then I hurt my back, and I just haven't gotten back into that, unfortunately. Hopefully will soon, but that said, I'm a huge fan of bodybuilding. I love lifting myself, and I really enjoy watching the Mr. Olympia competitions. And one competitor, let me take a step back. The Mr. Olympia 2021 just happened this past weekend. Well, it's technically still this weekend because this is Sunday, but it just happened over the past couple days, and don't worry, I will not spoil anything for you guys if you guys are also, bodybuilding fans or whatever. But one of my favorite competitors who I've been following for a really long time is the Canadian guy, Chris Bum. I always get confused if it's Brumstead or Bumstead. I'm pretty sure it's Chris Bumstead, not with no R in there. But anyway, he's a Canadian competitor. He also makes a ton of YouTube videos, obviously, with regards to his fitness stuff, promoting that, and then also just showing his progress towards the Mr. Olympia. And unfortunately, I didn't get to follow a lot of that this year because of moving and getting a new job and, kind of doing all the other stuff related to that. But I did get a chance to watch this prejudging today, finally. And the finals were last night. But again, no spoilers in this video. But I just want to do something to kind of lighten my mood. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the kind of like the final posing that they do here. And I just want to just give some general bodybuilding commentary. And hopefully you guys enjoy this. If not, stay tuned. I'm hoping to record some more city skylines tonight. And it's already kind of late already, but I did hope to do another Gulag Archipelago reading as well. But chances are those videos won't come out until next weekend anyway. So let's go ahead and get into this right here. So we've got the video pulled up. This is C-Bum, his video on his channel. So hopefully I don't get a little copyright thing as a result, but I'm just going to forward to what I think is a pretty reasonable point here. Okay, is this... I think it's towards the end. I want to get to the final posing thing because I don't want this video to be too long. Here we go. Oh man, it's like I keep clicking and it's every single pose that I want to analyze, but let's go back a little bit further, a little further, a little further. I'll edit this so that there's not an issue here. Please. Okay, so this is prejudging, and that was the first swap that they did, but I'm pretty sure later on here they do another set of poses. And sorry guys, bear with me on that. This is Chris Bumstead right here in the middle. This guy's name is Breon Ainsley. There was, kind of a little bit of rivalry between the two of them. And then number 17, I can't remember his name, but it has been, these three that have always been in the top 3. And in this commentary, you're going to be able to see when I point some stuff out, kind of why those guys are typically in the top 3, just by comparison to the other competitors. Okay, here we go. Third comparison. So for those of you who aren't familiar with how, bodybuilding competitions work, there's prejudging and then there's final judging in the night, and they usually switch competitors around so that the judges can make comparisons. All right, so first pose is front double bicep. So first of all, let me point out, let's just note how the setup looks, because I actually really enjoy the the way that the competitors set up the front double bicep pose, because it really allows you to see what I think is an excellent spot to see the development in the chest and even in the arms to a certain degree. And right now, Breon, well, let's see here. Didn't quite get it, but in that shot earlier, if I can get it back. Okay, here we go. Perfect. So in this shot right away, and I'm going to be perfectly honest with you guys, I'm not 100% certain exactly what the the judges look for in terms of things, but having been into fitness and working out pretty much since I was a teenager, there are things that I find aesthetically pleasing, and a lot of times when you start kind of going through muscle group by muscle group, you can make a determination kind of on your own and get a good idea of who's doing better than others. So right off the bat, just in this intermediate transition, you can see the development and the muscle striations in Chris's chest. If you compare that over to this individual here, which I'm completely blanking on their name, I should probably look it up, but you can see that the development and the way that the chest transitions into the front delt and the pec insertion and the striations, and and then of course size plays a role too, but obviously Chris is taller, so you have to account for that. You can already see that Chris's chest is a lot better developed, and in a couple later we'll compare to Breon as well, particularly in the side chest poses, and you can see also, take a look at the quads here. So what is this? I think this is the vastus medialis, and this is the vastus lateralis, and this is the rector femoris, and this other muscle in here, I always forget what it's called, but if you look at, just as an example, the vastus medialis here on these two competitors, number 3, and then this guy who he's got his arm over his number so he can't see what it is. And then number 2, you can see that, the quads aren't as striated, even though the overall leg development is really good and really aesthetic. The overall the striations in these two competitors is obviously not up to par, and even this guy over here is not up to par with Breon. You can see really good striations, and you can see how this meaty part comes down near the knee, and you can actually see it on Chris as well, despite the fact that this camera is in the way. So anyway, just some first thoughts on that. Seeing if I can try to pause it at a good stable moment where it's in focus. Okay, this may be as good as we can get. So, again, I pointed out the quads. You can see here that there's just kind of generally better quad development on number 27, number 2 versus number 17. Now, you can see that at this particular moment, Breon is not doing a vacuum pose. Chris is doing a vacuum pose, and so is this person. Between the two vacuums, I actually think it's difficult to tell which looks more aesthetically pleasing from this angle and looks more classic. But you can see that this appearance of this very, very slim waist and torso versus big quads, and then just a wide, broad shoulder look sets up kind of that X frame look here across these competitors. And the thin waist actually is arguably, it's hard for me to tell which between 17 and 27 is better, but I think that we can say that that both 17 and 27 do look a little bit better than number 2, number 16, and number 3. Just that appearance of that X frame kind of look is just not as apparent in these two competitors. So this is a front double bicep, so we are looking at the biceps predominantly in this pose, but before we get up there, we need to look at the the latissimus dorsi taper right here, because that is what helps you add this kind of broad look at the top right here. And actually, I think from this angle, it really is a toss-up, I would say, between number 27 and number 2. So, you know, Chris's lats are a little bit more kind of bulky at the top, but then taper into the torso or the abdomen like a little bit faster, let's say. What I really like about Breon's look is it just looks like this aesthetic triangle right here. It looks really good from this angle. So let's go ahead and look up at the biceps at this point. Now, this is where it gets kind of interesting because Chris seems to have a much better, so the bicep is composed of 2 muscles, obviously. That's because, you know, it's the bicep, and there's this inner head, and then there's kind of this like, I think this is the long head, and then the peak is the short head of the bicep. And Chris did a really good job of developing this long head of the bicep. You can see here that it's kind of bulging out. Same thing with number 17 as well. But let's take a look at number 3 and number 16. You can see that, especially on number 3, it's like a little bit lackluster in this particular region right here. We also can look for this line that kind of delineates the bicep from the tricep here. Now, actually, you can really see it on this guy. On number 17, it's a little bit harder to distinguish. Number 2, this is actually, you know, this is actually pretty good. But I feel like Chris's is just, you can really starkly see that line, and you can almost see this tendon coming through here, indicating that, you know, he got sufficiently lean. And it's a bummer that I think in an earlier pose in this set, you could really see the striations and the side delt as well here. Unfortunately, you can't in this, but take a look at Breon's peak in his bicep. I mean, he did a really excellent job of getting this peak to really pop out. And then, of course, you know, number 16 is just chilling here. I feel bad not saying anything positive about number 16. I suppose his quads look a little bit better in this particular pose at this angle, at this stage. But you can definitely see more prominent striations and development in number 27, number 2. So let's move on to another pose.
Side chest.
All right, side chest. Excellent. I paused it at a certain point. So I mentioned, or I paused it at the right point. So I mentioned earlier about just, you know, how you can see the chest development and the striations in that kind of transitional space. But I feel like here, this pose really showcases just how well Chris's chest is developed. You can see many, many striations here. You know, this region, especially the upper chest right here, and how it transitions into the delt on this side, and that's also very striated. You can see some striations here also on the front delt on, I guess this would be his left side. And compare that to this competitor right here. Not as many striations, but especially compare it to this competitor. The striations aren't as long. And this could be the angle. You know, this could be the angle, but that's something to look out for when you're thinking about, you know, judging bodybuilding. Now, one thing that is really important in this pose is, believe it or not, even though it's called side chest, is actually leg development. So what you want to see in leg development, or at least what I think makes something look better, is you want to be able to see that the glutes are striated. And now in this case, with Chris right here, you can see that there's striations in these glutes, and also the distinction between, you know, the multiple muscle groups, the glute medius and the glute maximus right here, taking shape. If we look over at Breon, it's just not popping as much, and it's also not popping as much here. Now, one thing you will notice, though, is this is really good quad striation on this guy over here. You know, although Chris's quad looks really good and really distinguished from the hamstring, you know, it's actually debatable whether or not, you know, who's really better. I feel like Breon, It's a toss-up between Breon and Chris, but I think in terms of quads, I would actually give it to this guy from this particular angle. Now, the judges obviously might be seeing this from a different angle, so that will influence their decision. Taking a look at just the hamstring right here, I think this is the semimembranosus. I can't remember which one's on the inside and which one's on the outside, but you really get a good defined line between, the hamstring, the lower glute, and the upper glute on Chris. And also the size of the hamstring here is looking really good versus hamstring size here is not as well defined. Neither is that line. That line's not as tight. And same thing with Breon over here. I just feel like the hamstring isn't as well defined on Breon. So, if I okay, and last thing to talk about, and this is getting kind of long, but the way that the delt actually comes into and forms, the upper arm right here, I actually think Breon, and a lot of this you can't control as a bodybuilder because it's just the way the delt inserts into, the bone and stuff like that. But I really feel like Breon right here has that kind of a more aesthetic look right here versus Chris where it's just kind of rounded off. You kind of see that look on this guy as well over here on the, I don't know if it's going to be easy to see my mouse, but this would be the guy on the far right of the screen. But that said, the delt itself, Chris has just got these insane striations. He's incredibly lean, and you really don't see that on any of the other competitors with the exception of here where maybe the front delt is striated on this guy. So if I had to give this pose to somebody, also Chris's tricep and brachialis looks really good. Breon actually has a really good triceps kind of, prominent triceps here. But if I had to give this pose to someone, I'd give it to Chris. Also, we didn't even talk about the core in this area, but his serratus looked really good, whereas I feel like some of these other guys are kind of struggling to flex the serratus in this pose. So let's go on.
Back double bicep.
All right, so back double bicep. Now this is really where the back development is meant to be showed, as well as the development in the glutes and in the hamstrings. And I'm going to be honest, I actually think last year Chris's back looked arguably better than it does this year, and I'm not going to pull up a different photo to look because it's just going to take too much time. But I really do think Breon, in terms of the actual back itself, wins this one. I mean, Breon's structure up here I just think is really good. His rhomboid development in this area is, very insane. He's got a really good distinction between like his actual rear delt and some of these rhomboid, striations and stuff like that, looking really good. I also like how his lats kind of crown down here, and it casts a shadow. And as you can see on Chris's back, it kind of looks like you can see these creases in the skin, but you really don't have that as drastic of a hanging over the skin that Breon does. Similar thing is true for this competitor over here, and we can't really see the other competitors, but you don't really see a distinction between the lower trap and the back that you do between Chris and Breon over here. Also distinguishing the mid traps is a lot easier to distinguish on Breon and Chris in this pose. Now the upper traps right here, Chris's upper traps are just absolutely giant. I mean, you can see how they taper into the neck and they give this really, really wide look. And, one other thing now that we're looking at the upper body is look at all these striations that you can see in Chris's tricep versus any of the other competitors. This could just be the angle and the way the shadow is getting cast. But that's an element of posing is you want to, take a look at that. And you just don't see the same tricep development in any of these other guys as you do in Chris. Now, one thing that Breon has is just this beautiful peaky bicep right here, especially this one on this side. It's just it's just really aesthetically pleasing. Chris has got good peaks in his bicep, but they could be, it's a toss-up between the two of them. And then some of the bicep on these other guys is just, it's good. I mean, obviously these guys look great, but it's not as good as Breon for sure, or Chris. Now, coming down to the glutes, it seems like Chris is holding a little bit of water down here in his glutes. I actually think that this competitor's glutes look the best from this particular angle, and hamstrings. But I do think Chris's hamstring development is much better than Breon's. But again, this is a back double bicep. If I had to give this pose to somebody, I actually think I would give it to Breon, just because of how well his back is developed. And then being as it's a toss-up between the glutes, I actually think Breon's glutes maybe look a little bit better than Chris's in this photo. I think Chris's hamstring differentiation looks better than Breon's, but that would not be enough for me to, distract away from just the back development that Breon has. And last year, Chris won the competition, and I feel like his back, just last year, when it could have been because Breon was maybe off a little bit too, but when you look at Chris's back last year, it was hands down. I mean, I couldn't imagine anyone else winning. So let's go on to the next pose.
Abdominals and thighs. 8-16. Switch bleed, 8-16. Abdominals and thighs.
Look at right there when Chris does that first stomp, just how awesome these striations are and the development is here. Unfortunately, when he actually hits the pose, I think he loses some of this a little bit, but clearly in this setup, you can just see that his quads look a lot better than any other competitor out here. Yeah, when he goes to reset, he kind of loses some of those striations, unfortunately. There we go. Now you can really see what's going on. And of course, he's hitting the vacuum. Breon's trying to hit a bit of a vacuum too. This guy's trying to hit a vacuum. Abs and thighs. In terms of just the aesthetics of the pose, I don't know. I like Breon's upper body the way it looks here, but I really don't like what he does with his legs. I think what Chris is doing with his legs just is kind of a nicer way to run this pose. But the upper body, I think, Breon looks really comfortable. He's kind of got this curve to his body. It makes it look way more aesthetic, whereas Chris is pretty much just straight up and down. But one thing that we look at here, at least I do, is, the way the lats tie into the serratus and then down. So Breon's got some good-looking serratus, but it's harder to see that delineation between the serratus and the lat right here. Number 17 right here, I think, is kind of struggling with this pose a little bit. His quads, you're not really seeing the striation. I mean, he's got giant quads for sure, and they're awesome developed. I probably have bigger quads than this guy, but no, I'm just kidding. My legs suck. But I'm just not really seeing the transition of the lats that I do in some of these other competitors. Now, one thing that you'll notice is this guy's doing a vacuum, and so is Chris, but just look at the way Chris's vacuum tapers, and then there's this like bump out here for the glutes, and you really don't see that same thing on this competitor over here, and part of that is because the oblique development here, I think, is just a little bit better on Chris. But if I had to give one critique to Chris, I think that he needs to train his abs just a little bit more. From a pose like this, obviously we're looking at the slim waist more than anything. That's kind of what's setting up the silhouette. But if his abs were just a little bit bigger, I feel like they'd pop, a lot better, like some of these other guys. I mean, this guy's abs are dope. They look really good, even though he's not hitting a vacuum, and he's got good development in serratus and stuff like that. This guy has insane serratus development. Look at that. That's awesome. If I had to give this pose to someone, Wow, it's really hard between Chris and Breon. I think just because of the way that his lats look and the way that his quads look, despite his midsection looks great. I would have to ignore the quads. I'd have to give this one to Chris. I'd have to ignore the abs. So
Relax.
so just right here when they say relax, when I see Chris standing in this particular pose, I just think all of his aesthetics are on point. And I don't know if the judges consider some of this transitional stuff in here, but when I look at a guy like Chris, I'm like, oh snap, I want to get in the gym and look like that, and that's not to say that any of these other guys don't look great either, but there's just something about this look that, the way the lats taper into the midsection and the proportion of the delts, the bicep, relative to everything else, and just the way the quads look, just striated and differentiated and all this stuff. When I just see Chris standing here like this, and also you can see the striations in the upper chest, him just standing there, and the differentiation in the delts even from this angle, you can't really see it as well on some of these other competitors. I mean, number 17 is in kind of a weird spot, but in a weird position. But, if I was judging this, I would definitely think that Chris just looks more classic physique, aesthetic in this angle.
Your favorite classic pose.
All right, favorite classic pose. So we're going to see a variety of poses right here. But I'm sorry, I'm such a C-bum fanboy, but the way that Chris sets this up, I just think is, such a good routine. Okay, and then he transitions into this. And what I love so much about this pose right here, so Breon likes this kind of like front double bicep, but he's got it expanded out a little bit with his arms a little bit further away, and more of a tilt in his body, so he can give this more aesthetic look. You'll notice that this guy is actually hitting the same pose that Chris hit initially, but when Chris hits this pose, and I do want to go back for a second. I know this video is 30 minutes long. Jeez, I can BS for a really long time, can't I? Just the way that his back, like here, his back looks amazing right here. You can see the striations in the tricep. His biceps look good. His glutes are all striated. This distinction between, his quad and his hamstring and his glutes is just clear. The calves maybe could be a little bit bigger, honestly, but you can see the striations on the inner side of this quad right here. Just everything looks so awesome, and he's rocking a mullet, of course. But let's try and go back just a little bit. Here's a setup. Okay, even though Breon's arm is in the way, I think that this is, you can really see the stark difference between Chris's pose and number 8's pose. Number 8 kind of looks like he's standing there. The space that you can see in between the lats and his arm just like isn't as good. The vacuum pose isn't as dramatic in this particular area. Look at Chris's shoulder. I mean, his shoulder just looks like an amoeba that's like ready to just grow like another arm and just start, coming over to this guy and putting his arm around him or something like that. The way that his chest insertion works into his front delt, I mean, I just think it's just superior to this guy. And then we go down to the quads. And Chris is doing something interesting too. He's kind of pushing in on his side right here, so it really gives the dramatic impression of that X-frame taper and just that really slim waist. I actually do want to give this guy some credit. I actually think his brachialis looks a little bit better than Chris's in this pose, but Chris just looks awesome here. I think Breon's pose is aesthetically pleasing for sure, and he's got a great physique, but I just think the way Chris executes these two poses together, boom, I mean, this just looks this just looks like a Greek, statue or whatever. And Breon looks a little bit showboaty in this particular case. And I'm sorry, Breon, because I actually think Breon is a really awesome competitor, and I've followed him a ton as well. And I'm happy and proud for all these guys that they're standing on the stage, and they all look incredible. So guys, I hope you guys enjoyed that little excursion into like kind of bodybuilding philosophy and what are some of the things that if you go to the gym and stuff like that. Obviously, I'm not talking about going and trying to compete at Mr. Olympia level, but if you go to the gym a lot, I mean, I watch these videos and then I try to replicate those looks, when I'm at the gym, try and get that wide shoulder look. What I've been really focusing on recently is, well, it doesn't look great on camera, obviously. I'm not jacked or anything, but the way that, my shoulder development is, I've really been trying to focus on the side delt so I can kind of push that out a little bit more. Been working a lot on the brachialis, in the upper arm here to give the bicep a little bit more width look to it. And obviously my legs are absolute garbage. So part of that is because, I hurt my back and I can't do as much, but been trying to work on that. So anyway, guys, I just wanted to make kind of a fun little video where, I just kind of talk about something that I enjoy, because I got to be honest, when you're just like sitting down for several hours at a time and, writing on political philosophy and thinking about how it affects your own life and, some of the decisions that you might be faced with. I mean, it admittedly is a downer. And then, you get in an argument or, some verbal confrontation with people who you care about a lot, and you realize that you guys are just at odds on some fundamental stuff. It can be a downer. So I wanted to do something, and of course I didn't mean to bring it down here at the end of the thing, but here's something that's a little bit fun. And if you guys have any comments on these competitors or any of my commentary, leave it in the comments below, and we'll talk about that. And awesome, man. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Later.